Viewers are warned that this video contains themes of murder, misogyny, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and violence towards children. All the information in this video is researched from publicly available sources, and every effort has been made to ensure that it is accurate or that any implicit bias is stated. Any clips used are protected under the YouTube Fair Use Policy. The intent of this video is not to glorify the horrific crimes of Joel Cauchi, but for informational, educational, and documentary purposes only. On the 13th of April, 2024, a man entered the Westfield in Bondi Junction and pulled a 30-centimeter blade from his backpack. What followed was an 18-minute rampage in which he killed 5, injured 12, and traumatized thousands, even stabbing a 9-month-old baby before he was executed by police. In the aftermath, Australia would hear stories of the tragic loss of the victims and the extraordinary heroism that saved people's lives on that terrible day. Welcome to The Worst of Us. For today's story, we're headed to Sydney. Joel Cauchi was born in Toowoomba, Australia, and he would live there for the first 35 years of his life. His parents would later describe how he excelled in school but suffered from mental health issues, being diagnosed with schizophrenia aged only 17. In 2019, Joel's doctor allowed him to come off his medication. Andrew Cauchi, Joel's father, said that this was only intended to be a 6-month trial with an option to recommence medication if needed. Joel took the opportunity to move out of his childhood home to Brisbane. According to Andrew, this was to escape the stigma of his mental health issues. He didn't want anyone knowing he has got a mental illness. He was embarrassed when I said anything about it, and he bolted off to Brisbane and he got a life. Cauchi would live transiently over the next 2 years, sleeping rough or in humble accommodation around Brisbane, Toowoomba, and the Gold Coast. Social media posts from this time show him to be looking for connection, including these strange Facebook posts where he is asking for groups of people who shoot guns, including handguns, to meet up with, chat with, and get to know. Between 2021 and 2023, he is reported to have been turning up for dinner at Tony's Kitchen, a homeless outreach charity in Toowoomba. Founder Tony Hurl would later tell reporters that he understood Cauchi was sleeping with other rough sleepers at a park near the hospital. He said the following of Cauchi: "We never had any issues with him. He was always polite. He was very softly spoken from memory. We only knew him as Joel." There was also a report by the owner of a knife sharpening business in Queensland, who chose to remain anonymous, would describe his reaction when Cauchi asked if they could sharpen his 2 everyday knives. "I thought it was weird. He wasn't a chef or a butcher. He goes, 'Oh no, I just do a bit of dabbling in the backyard with the knives, and I use them every day.' His expressions, he was just very vague. I suppose you could say no real personality about him, just weird. I heard he leaves 1-star reviews on a lot of people's pages all the time, so just that sort of person." By the end of January 2023, Cauchi would call his father to say that he had lost his unit in Brisbane and was about to be homeless and return to live in his childhood home in Toowoomba. His parents noticed that he had become fascinated with knives, collecting about 6 in January alone. After discovering the weapons, his father confiscated them, saying he refused to have them in the house. This led Joel to call the police with a domestic violence complaint, saying his father had stolen his knives. Andrew Cauchi would later open up about this in an interview, saying, "I said to Joel, 'You can stay here as long as you like, but you are not going to have these in my house,' and so I took them off him, knowing that there was going to be pandemonium in my house, but I was willing to put up with it." It is reported that Joel would drive 2.5 hours to Tweed Heads and purchase another knife the day after this incident. The Cauchi family is known to follow the Pentecostal faith, with Joel being raised religiously. However, at some point in 2023, Joel told his father that he no longer believed in God. He would also leave the family home and once again live a transient life around Queensland. There are reports that he was attempting to solicit work as an escort during this period, creating profiles on websites and even messaging a brothel to try and find business. The manager of the brothel would speak out a year later, saying that she feared the sex industry could have contributed to his declining mental health. If you were contracted by a couple, say a husband and a wife, the feedback that you might receive could be debilitating. It can smash your fragile mental health. Cauchi was known to Queensland police but had no criminal record, and their last interaction would be in this period. It was a street check, where Cauchi was stopped and questioned due to suspicious behavior in December of 2023. His social media, however, tells a different story. He is often seeking friendship, looking for someone to help him learn about astrophotography in Sydney in January 2024, and posting a review about how beautiful Sydney's Palm Beach was in February. In March, Cauchi would move to Sydney from Queensland. He is reported to have rented a small storage unit in Waterloo. He continues to seek friendship in the weeks that pass, posting on April 8th that he was surfing Bondi if anyone wanted to meet for a surf. In this period, he also sent his mother, Michelle, a selfie at Cauchi Beach in Sydney's east with the comment, "Mum, I just want to show you how beautiful Cauchi Beach is." This would come as a great relief to his parents, who had been distressed trying to contact their youngest child. It is reported that Michelle Cauchi had contacted Joel's bank that same day to check if he was still actively using it, hoping to establish that he was still alive. Upon receiving the message, Michelle and Andrew breathed a sigh of relief. Their son was in Sydney, he was alive, and seemed to be doing okay. The next time they saw him would be on national television. At 10:04 a.m. on the 13th of April, 2024, Joel Cauchi entered Saigon Noodle in Bondi Junction, just outside of the Westfield. He ordered a meal but was unable to pay and left. Staff would later say that he appeared confused during their interactions with him. 2 hours later, at 12:22 p.m., Cauchi returned to Saigon Noodle, this time paying for his meal and sitting down to eat. Upon leaving the restaurant, he appears to lose his balance and stumble into a nearby shop. A bystander would help him out, later saying that he assumed Cauchi to be high from the way he was acting. Cauchi would wander around the Oxford Street area for the next couple of hours with CCTV footage showing him leaving Daiso, Japan, 2 minutes from the Westfield at 12:36 p.m. At 3:10 p.m., Cauchi entered Westfield Bondi Junction, but quickly left. He returned 10 minutes later, entering on level 3 of the shopping center and pulling a 30-centimeter blade from his backpack. Reports later said that he stabbed his first victim in the back as she was lining up to buy coffee. Shoppers would begin to scream and run to get away from the danger as he swung his blade. As Cauchi made his way up the escalator to level 4 of the shopping center, he would be met by Damien Guerrero and Silas Despro, 2 French nationals working in construction who attempted to stop his progress. This footage captured Damien jabbing at Cauchi with a bollard as he attempts to climb the escalator, and it would go viral in the days following the attack, with people dubbing Damien Bollard Man as they applauded his bravery. On level 4, Cauchi would attack several people, leaving a trail of carnage between the Meyer and David Jones stores. It was here that he encountered Ashley Good, a new mother out shopping with her 9-month-old baby girl. Cauchi stabbed the mother and daughter, injuring both. Ashley would desperately hand her wounded baby to 2 men for protection. They would later describe this to reporters.
I've just been told that you've been helping out. Can you tell us what happened?
The baby got stabbed and the mum got stabbed and the mum come over with the baby and threw it at me and just holding the baby. Yeah, it looked pretty bad, but yeah.
And how were you able to help out?
It just holding the baby and trying to compress the baby, and same with the mother, trying to compress the blood from stopping and calling ambulance and police.
That would have been pretty horrific to see. What were those injuries actually like?
Oh, very bad. There's a lot of blood on the floor, and hope the baby's all right. Yeah.
You've just been called a hero. I can imagine it's a pretty traumatic afternoon for you.
It was.
Where were you this afternoon? How did it actually unfold in your eyes?
No, we were just shopping. Saw the man run up to the woman with the baby, and then we were both ready to go and help out, but I just said to my brother, we got to ran in, told the guys to just lock up the doors, and then the mother came with the baby, bleeding, stabbed, and we got them into the store and just got them safe and then rang for help.
And what did you use to help stop the blood?
Just from the shop. Just kept yelling out to get some clothes, get some shirts, and just help us to compress and stop the babies from bleeding.
And what sort of condition was the actual baby? We understand it was a 9-month-old.
Brother holding the baby so well and really compressing. I think the baby's fine. The mother, unfortunately, me and another lady, which were compressing, she started to have a lot of blood coming out of her mouth.
At this point in the attack, people were screaming, running for safety, taking shelter in stores, and desperately calling for help for the wounded. This commotion attracted security guards Faraz Tahir and Muhammad Taha, who had been patrolling level 4 and rushed to check that everything was okay. As they approached, the two men were focused on the wounded women on the ground, which allowed Cauchi to take them by surprise. Muhammad Taha would later describe how Faraz was attacked first, as he was the first to approach the carnage. Cauchi stabbed him in the chest, and as Taha tried to help his partner, Cauchi would turn on him, stabbing him in the stomach and badly wounding him. Despite his injuries, Muhammad was able to radio for help, becoming one of the first to raise the alarm on what was happening in the center. A witness who was hiding behind the closed doors of the Zara store on level 4 would later describe how Cauchi was acting completely unhinged, coming up to the front of the shop and threatening everybody inside but not coming in. The witness even described a moment where Cauchi was near the escalator and briefly appeared confused, scratching his head with the knife and looking down as if to say, "What have I done?" before snapping back and charging up the escalator.
I just feel he was completely unhinged. He was just lost the plot, because when I was in Zara just buying clothes, and there was a point where he comes to the front of the shop and he just like looks at everyone in Zara and kind of threatens them, but doesn't go in. And then there was like a moment where he was just scratching his head with the knife, and nobody was home. He was right at the front just before you got to the escalators, like at the shop front. And there was just a moment where he was just like scratching his head with the knife and just like looking down, and just like it was like, what have I done kind of situation. And there was a moment confused, just complete. And then from that moment, I don't know, something else snapped in his head, and then he started storming up the escalators.
On level 5, video footage captured Cauchi jogging up to people and lunging at them. This video also shows how he is easily dissuaded when people look bigger than him, including this brave man who faced Cauchi down as he approached his family, putting himself between the knifeman and his children. At this point, CCTV footage from inside the Westfield would also pick up Police Inspector Amy Scott running towards the attack, followed by bystanders who had armed themselves with chairs. Amy had been conducting routine checks on hospitality venues in the area, and so was the first on the scene when the police were alerted to the situation. The men who ran after her would later describe how they had no idea of the severity of what was happening, but thought that Amy could use backup, and so they armed themselves with whatever they could find and ran towards the danger. Amy Scott would confront Joel Cauchi on level 5 of the shopping center, approaching him without her weapon drawn. Backed only by a few civilians armed with chairs, she approached and told him to drop the knife. Cauchi paused, looking over the group of people facing him, and then raised his knife and charged towards Amy. She drew her weapon and shot 3 times. At 3:38 p.m., 18 minutes after the start of his rampage, Joel Cauchi fell to the ground. Amy Scott ran towards him and turned him over. The knife had fallen under his chest, so she pulled it from under him and threw it to the side before trying to administer CPR. The other officers who had begun to swarm the Westfield would come running to the scene and allow Amy to step away. Witnesses described how she switched straight from CPR into policing, telling people to keep clear of the area even as they thanked her for saving them. Thousands of people were evacuated from Westfield as the attack unfolded, including people who had taken cover inside shops once the attack was over, because they had heard gunshots and feared that the attacker was the shooter. Police and ambulance would discover 5 dead at the scene, with another dying of their wounds in the hospital later that day. A further 11 people were injured during Cauchi's attack, including Ashley Good's 9-month-old baby. The full list of victims is as follows. 27-year-old Tishan Cheng, a Chinese national who was studying in Sydney and had just completed her exams. She was engaged to be married and was on the phone to her fiancé a few minutes before the attack, even sending him a photo of some clothes and a bag she was trying on in what would be some of her final moments. Pikria Darchia, a 55-year-old Georgian who was a talented artist and designer, remembered as a beautiful woman who always had a positive outlook on life, enjoyed life to the fullest, and reveled with pride over her amazing sons and beautiful granddaughters who all loved her. The GoFundMe set up to support her sons following her death described how her family's grief is palpable and unimaginable as they face the future without her. She was on the phone to her son, Irakli, 10 minutes before the attack. 38-year-old new mother, Ashley Good, described by her family as a beautiful mother, daughter, sister, partner, friend, all-around outstanding human, and so much more. That morning, she had posted a photo proudly sharing that her baby was 9 months old, and friends remember that she had always wanted to be a mother. She died a hero, giving her life for her child. Dawn Singleton, a 25-year-old retail worker who was the daughter of entrepreneur John Singleton, described by a friend as the most perfect human being that I have ever met. She had got engaged to her childhood sweetheart the previous year and had bought a wedding dress about a week before she was murdered. Radio broadcaster Ray Hadley would give a heartbreaking call into a news channel where he described how Dawn's father had asked him to find out if she was one of the victims of the stabbing after seeing the event on the news.
I got a text from Singo about 6:30 pleading for me to ring him. Didn't know what it was about. We've been mates for 30 years. I rang him and he said, I think my Dawny is one of those who's lost their life. And I can't confirm it. Can you do something? So I said, I'll do what I can. I rang some contacts in police. I rang the police commissioner and asked her if she had any names, and she said only one, and confirmed it was Dawn, a beautiful 25-year-old girl. So I've known her since she was born, and I had the job of ringing John back and officially confirming that his dear darling daughter had been stabbed to death by this lunatic.
47-year-old acclaimed architect Jade Young, remembered by a friend as a special soul who touched many lives. A mother to 2 children, Jade's own mother would later describe in an interview how Jade would do anything for her girls. Her family would issue a statement following her death saying that Jade's death shattered their world, and that while they were overwhelmed by the outpouring of support from friends and the community, Jade's death left a gaping hole in their lives. And finally, 30-year-old Faraz Ahmed Tahir, an unarmed security guard and refugee who had fled persecution in Pakistan. Faraz was on his first day shift at Westfield on April 13, 2024. He is remembered as a cherished member of the local community, known for his unwavering good deeds, volunteer causes, and helping the elderly. He is said to have always put others before himself. Ashley Good's 9-month-old baby daughter was rushed into surgery for her injuries as news of the attack began to break on the 13th of April, 2024. Australia would hold its breath for days, waiting for an update on the state of the 9-month-old, and breathe a collective sigh of relief when the baby was taken out of intensive care on the 16th of April and discharged from hospital on the 21st. Australia would be informed of the horrors of April 13th in the hours following the attack, as footage began to leak online. In the evening, New South Wales Police Commissioner Karen Webb addressed the media, saying that police believed the perpetrator to be a 40-year-old man who acted alone, and that if it was the person they suspected, this was not a terrorist attack, and that it was too early to speculate on the stabber's motivation.
Later this evening, we became aware of who we believe the offender is, and we believe that he is a 40-year-old man. However, we are waiting to formally identify him, and we cannot speculate yet on his identification. But let me assure you that we are confident that there is no ongoing risk, and we are dealing with one person who is now deceased. Are there any questions?
What do you know about this 40-year-old man at this stage?
Well, I actually will hand over to the Deputy Commissioner who's acting for investigations about, we know a little bit about this person, but as I said, we're waiting to confirm his identification. And if in fact it is the person that we believe it is, then we don't have fears for that person holding an ideation. In other words, that it's not a terrorism incident.
Cauchi would be identified as the stabber the next day through the distinctive gray, red, and yellow dragon tattoo on his right arm. Reporters would approach a litany of people who knew him to try and garner insight into his past and potential motivations. His parents would be among the first to give statements, saying their thoughts were with the victims and that their son would be devastated by what he had done if he were in his right mind.
I'm extremely sorry. I'm heartbroken for you. Look, this is so horrendous that I can't even explain it. You're trying to give me, to give you an intelligent conversation. I can't do it because I'm just devastated. I love my son. I made myself a servant to my son when I found out he had a mental illness. I became his servant. I did everything because I love that boy. I'm loving a monster. To you, he's a monster. To me, he was a very sick boy.
This is a parent's absolute nightmare. when they have a child with mental illness, that something like this would happen. And my heart goes out to the people our son has hurt. If he was in his right mind, he would be absolutely devastated at what he has done. But he obviously was not in his right mind. He somehow had been triggered into a psychosis and he'd lost touch with reality.
Conversation around Cauchi's motivation dominated the news cycle. As well as his fragile mental health, people were quick to note that Cauchi had specifically targeted women during his attack. Karen Webb would give an interview to ABC on the 15th of April, where she suggested that misogyny was a likely motivator for Cauchi's actions.
The videos speak for themselves, don't they? And that's certainly a line of inquiry for us. It's obvious to me, it's obvious to detectives that seems to be an area of interest that the offender had focused on women and avoided the men. As you know, and has been reported, 5 of the deceased are women, and the majority of victims in hospital are also women. We don't know what was operating in the mind of the offender, and that's why it's important now that detectives spend so much time interviewing those who know him, were around him, close to him, so we can get some insight into what he might have been thinking. We won't know necessarily, but we have to take a judgment from those who know him.
When asked by reporters if he had any idea of his son's motivation, Andrew Cauchi would point to Joel's battle with schizophrenia, as well as echoing the sentiments of Karen Webb.
I can't put it into words. It's terrible. I mean, how would you feel if your son was the man that I recognised on TV, and I rang the New South Wales police and I said, look, if you don't know a motive, I'll give you one. He's got schizophrenia. Because he wanted a girlfriend, and he's got no social skills, and he was frustrated out of his brain.
As the investigation continued, police reported that Cauchi had conducted internet searches for knives and how to kill in the days prior to the attack, and there were reports that he was seen at 2 other Westfield shopping centers in Sydney, which led investigators to believe he may have been scoping them out. This evidence points to more premeditation than initially thought by investigators. Simon Buddha, the crime editor for the A Current Affair news show, would describe learning this unsettling information from police. Initially, everyone thought this was a man suffering from schizophrenia whose mind has snapped, words in his head. I have learned today that the investigators have been able to download data from his phone, which has indicated that he had a fixation with killings. He also had a fixation with knives. That tells us it wasn't a spur-of-the-moment attack. Beforehand, he was thinking about killing, and that is terribly frightening. Criminal psychologist Tim Watson-Monroe would also talk about his diagnosis of Cauchi following the release of this new information during an interview with 9 News.
Well, I initially wondered whether it was madness or badness. It would seem that it's actually both. There's a diagnosis of schizophrenia, but he's also a person who is clearly planning this crime. I understand that Google traces have indicated that he was looking up how to kill people, how to acquire knives, and as the footage clearly reflects, there's planning here. There's an intention, obviously, to kill people, and sadly, 5 of the 6 people who were killed were women, so there was a misogynist element to it as well, Carl.
It changes the way we look at it, doesn't it?
In the period before Cauchi was identified as the Bondi stabber, misinformation about the perpetrator's identity would circulate on X, Tumblr, and Telegram. As blurry photos of Cauchi surfaced online, many people made the baseless assumption that the attack was linked to Islamic terrorism. Among these was prominent right-wing British commentator Julia Hartley-Brewer, who posted the following statement on X. "Another day, another terror attack by another Islamist terrorist. 6 dead, others seriously injured, including a baby. Today, it's Australia's turn. The other day, it was France's. It'll be our turn again next. How long do our governments think we're going to put up with this?" This was viewed more than 9 million times, and Hartley-Brewer would later confirm that this was incorrect with the following statement. She issued no apology for spreading misinformation. Rachel Riley, a British television presenter, would link the attack to worldwide demonstrations in support of Palestine following Israel's military action in the Gaza Strip during the ongoing 2023 Israel-Hamas war. It is important to note that the people at the demonstrations Rachel is referring to are not, as she states, calling for violence, but simply for an immediate ceasefire and an end to the illegal occupation, apartheid conditions, and unfolding humanitarian crisis in the region. Her characterization of pro-Palestine demonstrations as violent echoes that of media outlets who use this type of rhetoric to engage their audience by stoking fear and anger about this divisive issue. Rachel's statement is as follows. For 6 months now, people have been out on our streets proudly calling for Intifada revolution. If you want to know what globalized the Intifada looks like, see the Sydney Mall. 5 victims stabbed to death and 8 transferred to hospital, including a baby, due to one man and a knife. In the second Intifada, over 1,000 Israelis were murdered in restaurants, on buses, and in the streets by suicide bombings, stabbings, stoning, lynching, shooting, rockets. The youngest victim was just 9 hours old. Sydney Mall, multiple times over, is what they've been proudly calling for. Following massive backlash to this statement, Rachel would post the following lengthy apology. She claimed she had not intended to imply that the attack was linked to Islamic extremism and that her message was misunderstood. The Islamophobia Register of Australia recorded 46 reports of hate-related incidents following the stabbing, which they partially attributed to misinformation. Disinformation researcher Esther Chan would later speak about this, saying, "It is important to be aware of how incidents like this can be used to promote harmful narratives." As well as false reports of the attacker being an Islamic extremist, false reports would begin to circulate claiming the attacker was 20-year-old University of Technology student Benjamin Cohen. This led to conspiracy theories that he was a Jewish extremist, and he was bombarded by thousands of messages on social media as mentions of Benjamin Cohen on X reached over 72,000 overnight. Benjamin would later recall waking his mother around 1 a.m., telling her he was concerned at how fast his name and photo were circulating and hoping it would blow over in the morning. Around 6 a.m., the theory that Benjamin was the stabber would break into the mainstream when Australian Channel 7 News named him as the 40-year-old lone wolf attacker in a now-deleted video report led by presenters Monique Wright and Michael Usher, which was published without verification. This report would further propagate the misinformation, as people took it as confirmation of the stabber's identity from a credible news source. Mark Cohen, Benjamin's father, would respond to the hatred online with the following message. "Hey, at New South Wales Police, you need to release the name of the Bondi Junction attacker before this nonsense claiming it was my son causes more harm." Cauchi's name would be released by police about an hour and a half after Mark tweeted this, and the frenzy around Benjamin Cohen would subside. 7 News removed the report that named him, and Benjamin would later give an interview where he described the experience of being mistakenly outed as a killer.
It's extremely disappointing to me to see people mindlessly propagating misinformation like this without even the slightest thought put into fact-checking. But what's even more disappointing to me is a major news network doing this, using my name, without waiting for a statement from the police to verify this, or going out to try verify it themselves. This whole incident has been highly distressing and disappointing for myself and my family.
Channel 7 would issue an apology to Benjamin where they claimed their identification of him was human error. He sued them for defamation on the 17th of April, and the case was settled only 9 days later, with 7 acknowledging their error as a grave mistake. The blind, misinformed hatred seen online after the Bondi stabbings can perhaps be best exemplified by Australian neo-Nazi Thomas Sewell, who posted "deportations now" when he believed the attacker to be Muslim, and then made anti-Semitic comments when he believed the attacker to be Jewish. Thomas was, of course, incorrect in every claim he made about the attacker's identity. Amidst the stories of the horrors of the 13th of April, stories would also circulate of the extraordinary heroism shown by police officer Amy Scott, who was commended for her instinctive bravery in running into the danger without a thought of her own safety, and her professionalism handling the situation alone while her colleagues arrived. She was hailed as a hero across Australia in the days and weeks following the attack. Scott had previously been recognized for her bravery in 2019, where she demonstrated courage and devotion to duty in the case of missing teenager Ursula Barwick. Scott discovered the circumstances of Ursula's death and was praised by the Barwick family for not giving up until she found the truth. On June 21st, she was awarded with the Commissioner's Valor Award for her conduct during the stabbing at a graduation ceremony at Goulburn Police Academy in New South Wales. She also gave an interview where she expressed her gratitude for her team and the heroic acts of everyday civilians.
The extraordinary acts of bravery that we saw from everyday civilians, it was second to none. really importantly as well, are those victims, their family and friends, who will be forever dealing with an unfathomable tragedy.
She described the experience as traumatic, but said this would be the case for everyone present that day. Graduates of the Academy, when asked, hailed Amy as a role model and inspiration.
I can imagine that situation would have been terrifying. I definitely want to aim for that one day.
She's a role model for all police officers in New South Wales and certainly a role model for me.
Security guard Muhammad Taha would also be praised for his bravery in confronting Cauchi alongside Faraz Tahir. Taha had been unaware that Cauchi was armed when he had rushed to confront him and was severely wounded as he attempted to save people's lives. In an interview with ABC, Taha would describe how he had radioed security guard Muhammad Fahad for backup. Taha and Fahad are childhood best friends who moved to Australia from Pakistan together, and in that darkest moment, as he lay injured, the first aid administered by his best friend would save Muhammad Taha's life.
If he wasn't there and he didn't came on time, so maybe I wouldn't be here. It's like God's will that he's with me and I'm with him.
Taha was in Australia on an expiring work visa but was granted a permanent residence visa for his bravery. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese gave the following statement. "This is a person of clearly good character. This is someone who put his own safety at risk, working as a security officer in order to provide safety for people who were there at Westfield." Muhammad Taha continues his recovery with the help of his best friend. Alongside the stories of Amy and Muhammad were stories of brave civilians. Bollard man Damien Guerrero and his friend Silas Despero were hailed for jumping into action during Cauchi's rampage, confronting him to slow him down. The two would describe their experience in an interview with 7 News.
We tried to catch him, but he was going down the stairs. Then we saw him going down, so we followed him from the top, tried to maybe throw the ball to him, but we couldn't. We just think we need something to catch him.
I'm not gonna lie, I was scared, but you cannot just stay away and not do anything.
We didn't think. He's you cannot think at that moment. It's just adrenaline.
Just determined to kill people.
The eyes was empty eyes. It was he wasn't there.
A French national, Damien's work visa was expiring at the time of the attack, and the Australian public would call for him to be granted citizenship. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said the following. "I say this to Damien Guerrero, who is dealing with his visa applications, that you are welcome here. This is someone who we would welcome becoming an Australian citizen, although that would of course be a loss for France." It says a lot about the nature of humanity at a time when we are facing difficult issues, that someone who is not a citizen of this country stood bravely at the top of those escalators and stopped this perpetrator from getting onto another floor and potentially inflicting further carnage on citizens. I think that on Saturday, we saw some of the best of human character at the same time as we saw such devastating tragedy, and I thank Damien for his extraordinary efforts. Damien was made an Australian permanent resident on the 18th of April as a reward for his heroism in Bondi Junction. Also present in Westfield on the 13th of April 2024 was Bondi Rescue star lifeguard Andrew Reedy Reed. As the attack unfolded, Andrew refused evacuation orders and rushed out of the safety of the Myer store so that he could help the injured, administering CPR to Cauchi's victims before the threat had been neutralized. He gave an interview to 7 News where he described the hellish scenes of the attack, as well as his role in helping the victims.
We were looking out, and then I heard the 2 gunshots go off, and they went off around the corner, and I was like, wow, what's going on out here? And then as I looked down towards level 4, I could see a lady just bleeding really badly, and I was like, I needed to go and help. So I actually went down the escalators in Myer and went to go out, and the guy tried to stop me, and I said, mate, you need to lift it up. I need to go and help. And he's like, are you sure? And I'm like, mate, 100%. And I said, lift up the roller door, and I slid under and went around, and what I saw was just begs belief. It was the first lady that I'd originally seen, she just had so much blood around her, and then when I went in to help, there was a couple of people already helping her, and then when I went to help her as well, I looked up, and just looking down through Westfield, there was just multiple victims sort of spread out 30, 50 metres apart, and the next lady, she looked like she was in a pretty bad way as well. So I sort of helped stabilise the first one with a couple of other members of the public, and then I went on to the next one where 2 police officers were working on her, and we gave it a good crack with a fair bit of CPR, and then a couple of female paramedics came along and they helped, and they put a Goodell in and stuff, and I just kept doing CPR. But that lady she'd lost a lot of blood, so I think she's probably one of the victims that passed, sadly. And then I went on to go to the next victim, who was sort of getting a little bit of help with some paramedics, and I just saw this pram just sitting there empty, and I got 3 young kids, and the first thing I thought was, oh my God, where are they? And that really stuck with me, you know. And then went to the next one, and I think that lady, the next lady, was deceased as well, which was terrible. And then the place was just flooded with police and ambulance.
How are you doing tonight? That's a terrible thing to witness, mate.
Oh, mate, I'm like we have seen some crazy stuff on the beach, but I don't think it's sunk in 100% yet. Like, I think I'll probably have some nightmares over what I saw, especially with that poor second lady. But you know, in the end, as citizens in Australia, it's our job to help. So
you're right about that.
You know, we just did what we did.
Andrew was hailed as a hero for his selfless bravery during the attack. Among the civilians who armed themselves with chairs and rushed into danger behind Amy Scott was Ryan Bramble. Ryan had been out shopping on April 13th, and he and his friends had decided they had to help when they saw the carnage unfolding. He would give an interview to News Hub where he talked about seeing Cauchi that day.
The bloke with the knife, he's walked around the corner and confronted me. He was only a few metres away. I don't know, we both made eye contact, and I looked at the knife, looked at him. He just looked at me in the eyes, and I don't know what his thought was, but he just kept going. The way he was so calm, the way he was just so calm about it, and he killed all those people. I didn't realise he'd killed all those people. I just thought it was a loony running around intimidating people with a knife. Just the fact that he was so calm and his eyes were pretty black, like his pupils were pumping. And I don't think he was on drugs, it was just the adrenaline and that was going in him.
Has that sort of sunk in that you helped save lives in that moment?
Only when I'm by myself at home, when I'm just trying to relax, it sort of kicks in a little bit, and it's like, it's the severity of what's just happened.
Ryan would be hailed as a hero for running into danger with Amy Scott when he could have easily fled for his own protection. Survivor Leah Barco would also give an interview to 9 News following Cauchi's attack. Leah was among those stabbed by Cauchi, and her testimony of the attack was equal parts disturbing and touching as she described her interaction with Cauchi and the people that helped save her life following her injuries.
And I remember one man walking in front of me, but he was walking you can read body language, and all his body language transmit that he's going out to the shopping through the same entrance I come in. He was on the left side, and he was pretty far away of me, at least 6 meters. And he was walking. I remember dark clothes. I can't say which color, but it was dark because I was looking on my phone, but you can see someone there. And in some point, I remember he made a decision to cross to my side. And then he just crashed on my body in the left side. But I felt like that so strong, painful left side. I think so aggressive man, what's wrong with him? And I remember he ran, because I started to hear he ran, and my brain said what's going on, what he did to me.
Did you see the knife?
No.
Did he say anything?
Yes, catch you.
Catch you?
Yes, he said catch you.
She then realised she was bleeding when another shopper, a man, grabbed her and helped her into a store and closed the doors.
When you're on the floor, you're bleeding. And you can see everyone's expression. And some of them were crying. They were scared.
For you?
For their lives also. Some of the woman, she was saying oh my God, he's coming for me, he's coming for me.
But her rescuer took control and tried to stop the bleeding.
If I'm not wrong, he had a green T-shirt.
So the man in the green T-shirt?
Yes.
He may have saved your life. If he's watching, what would you like to say to the man in the green T-shirt?
I would like to really see him again at least give him a hug, because I don't know how we will manage everything without him in that moment.
Leah would be reunited with Green Shirt Man Wayne Tolver Banks in the days following this interview.
Leah Barco got her wish.
Oh my God!
How are you?
Yes, good.
A hug with her hero.
Yes, I remember you. You were so tall. What is happened? Oh my God.
So happy that you're alive.
For me, he was like that angel who just appeared in the right moment, in the right place.
Sydney would mourn the Bondi stabbings collectively, holding a candlelit vigil on the 21st of April to remember the victims. And once the doors of Westfield Bondi Junction opened again on the 19th, it was swarmed by tearful citizens who laid down flowers and tributes to pay their respects to the victims. The crime would fit a larger pattern of violence against women in Australia, with campaign group Destroy the Joint reporting that 27 women were killed in the first 119 days of 2024. This would prompt demonstrations in cities around Australia with the slogan, "No More," protesting gender-based violence and calling for tougher laws to punish those who engage in acts of violence towards women. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese attended a march in Canberra where he described violence against women as a national crisis and admitted the government at all levels needed to do better. He said the following: "We need to change culture, the attitudes, the legal system, and the approach by all governments. We need to make sure that this isn't up to women. It's up to men to change men's behavior as well." The events of the 2024 Bondi Junction stabbings rocked Australia, as the horror of Joel Cauchi's actions prompted national conversation about gender-based violence, mental health, and security in public spaces. It feels uncomfortable to bring up Cauchi's own mental health considering what he did, as there could never be any justification for his actions, and bringing up his own struggles in relation to them feels like an abdication of blame. However, it is safe to say that he slipped through the cracks of the mental health system, and it was this failure of the state that ultimately allowed the events of the 13th of April 2024 to take place. Although this story shows us some incredible people, from Amy Scott and Muhammad Taha risking their lives to protect innocent people, to civilians who leapt into action to try and stop Cauchi or help the wounded, ending on a heartwarming note about how the community stopped the killer would be a disservice to the survivors and the families of the victims. This should have never been allowed to happen, and we can only hope that the societal change from the national conversations around mental health, gender-based violence, and security in public places will help to prevent another horror like this in the future. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to the channel for more true crime documentaries.